My name is Eugene Rule. I also known as Cool Rule. And so I want to just briefly introduce the program here because the Sunday morning at the Marxist Library is a project of the Institute for the Critical Study of Society at the Nebel Proctor Marxist Library, which was formed about 20 years ago to further the library's goals of preserving our written heritage as well as supporting the emerging struggles for racial and gender equality and for socialism. We are all active in different aspects of the people's struggles in the Bay Area and globally. Some of us are affiliated with specific political parties and tendencies. Others are not. So we do not necessarily all agree on all issues, and the opinions expressed in our forums are those of the speakers only and do not represent a group consensus on the issues concerned. However, we are united in our respect for the work of Karl Marx and our belief that his work will remain as important for the class struggles of the future as they have been for the past. And as a group, we continue to draw inspiration from the work of Karl Marx, including his 11th thesis on Feuerbach. The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it. And as we all know, the world is undergoing rapid changes, not all under our control. And we're very fortunate in having a scholar from India, Basudev Nag Choudhary, who will be introduced by our comrade Raj Sahai, who is also from India, but now resident here in the Bay Area. And he will pronounce our speaker's name correctly, I'm sure. So with that, I will give it back to you, Raj.
Thank you, Gene. So what is neoliberalism is the first thing I've been asked to explain before we ask our speaker to speak on the subject of COVID-19 and the crisis of neoliberalism. The father of neoliberalism is Friedrich Hayek, everybody generally is agreed, who was a contemporary of John Maynard Keynes. Both Maynard Keynes and Friedrich Hayek are bourgeois economists. Now, Hayek argued in 1936, he was at London School of Economics, same time as Keynes was. He said, how can the combination of fragments of knowledge existing in different minds bring about results which, if they were to be brought about deliberately, would require a knowledge on the part of the directing mind which no single person can possess. This is his wisdom, quote unquote wisdom, that he imparted. Of course, he was ignored. Period was when socialism was on the rise, Soviet Union was doing well, and the Western world was in economic crisis. So the prominent role in the bourgeois world became that of Keynes. And one version of Keynes was in the United States, the New Deal of Roosevelt. But Hayek understood that the market, but Hayek has come back in our lives again in a big way. Hayek understood that the market could be thought as a kind of mind. I mean, this is kind of like Hegel, right? The idea that the world reality comes from the mind, you know, Hayek. So it's kind of a, that sort of thing. Hayek's was a total worldview, a way of structuring all reality on the model of economic competition. So this is his idea, which came into practice. Neoliberalism is a specific form, therefore, of capitalist economic policy sense. Neoliberalism is contemporarily used to refer to market-oriented reform policies, such as eliminating price controls, deregulating capital markets, lowering trade barriers, and reducing state influence in the economy, especially through privatization and austerity. It is commonly associated with economic policies introduced by Margaret Thatcher in the UK and Ronald Reagan in the US in 1980s. As a developmental model, it refers to the rejection of structuralist economics, for example, that of Keynesianism in favor of the Washington Consensus, which was to restructure the third world, which was in crisis based on the three institutions of IMF, World Bank, and the US Treasury Department. As a public policy, it involves the privatization of public economic sectors or services, the deregulation of private corporations, sharp decrease of government debt, although it is in the United States, as you know, debt is rising, and reduction of spending on public works. As an ideology, it denotes a conception of freedom as an overarching social value associated with reducing state functions to those of a minimal state. But its contradiction is that it is the state that enforces the idea of neoliberalism on behalf of capital over a society of people who seek security and predictability in the economy to be able to live and raise family, live in secure old age, etc. So our speaker today is Basudev Nag Choudhary, who will be speaking to us from Kolkata in West Bengal state in India. He's a member of a political party called People's Brigade, which is Marxist-Leninist in its orientation. Our speaker today is author of a new book titled Neoliberalism, a Stage of Irresolvable Contradiction, which will be published, he told me after I wrote, not later this year, but probably early next year. We hope soon because I want to be the first person to buy it. I happen to have read his first 3 chapters, and I think he will contribute a great deal. So with that, welcome to our program, Basudev. Floor is yours.
Raj, if you don't mind unsharing your screen so that Basudev can share his screen.
Yes, I'm going to get out of my screen share. Yeah, okay, I'm out of that.
Yeah. Basudev, you have the floor, and if you want to share your screen, you could do it now, I guess.
Yes, thank you, Raj, and thanks all others. Can you hear me?
Yes.
A little louder would be better, but we can hear you.
Okay, this is fine?
Yeah. Very good.
Okay, I will show the figures, then I will share the screen, okay? So, first,
we don't see your screen yet, Basudev. You have to go down to the bottom and hit the share screen, which is the green button, and then select share. Yeah.
Raj, when I will show the figures, then only I will share the screen, okay? It will be good.
But share screen is the only way we can see it.
Yeah, but he's not ready to share the screen yet. When the time comes, he's going to share it.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
Yes. When I'll show the figures, okay, I'll share the screen.
Okay, fine.
So you can see me right now, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all. So first, let me tell you that I must apologize for since this presentation has to be rescheduled on this day because it was previously scheduled in earlier and I had to postpone that program due to some emergency. Actually, in our province, it was a cyclonic storm came in, and which is known as Amphan now, and that devastated the entire coastal area of West Bengal. So we had to, from our party, we had to go for rescue and relief works. So I was not present here. And now I'm here today. So today my topic is COVID-19 and the crisis of neoliberalism. Okay. First of all, there are two questions regarding this topic, actually. Because in mainstream, the question is that whether this COVID-19 has led to a crisis of the economy. That is the general campaign from the mainstream institutions, that COVID-19 has created such a situation that the economy is going to depend into crisis. But those who believe actually that the neoliberal capitalism was actually depending into crisis. So for them, the question is, has this COVID-19 added an acceleration to that crisis? So either that neoliberal economy, whatever we call it, so it was all right, perfectly all right, just COVID-19 has come here and created a mess. We needed to go for lockdowns, and the economy is suffering by crisis. One is, this is what is campaigned from the mainstream economy. And principally from the left orientations, people are saying that no, actually the economy was in crisis, but COVID-19 has added an acceleration to it. But today I will try to show that neoliberal capitalism, yes, it was in crisis, but COVID-19 and the measures to fight it, whatever the measures taken in so-called fighting COVID-19, has indeed helped neoliberalism to breathe a little. They have actually been able to buy some time. That is what I will try to show in my presentation today. So there, someone may say that whether it is a is it a conspiracy theory, like someone has applied some bioweapon, or that I'm not going to tell that. My point is, first of all, amongst the scientists, there are still debates going on whether this coronavirus is, this novel coronavirus is naturally mutated or manually manipulated. So that is a debate that is still going on. So I'm not going to speak on that. And if you talk about the conspiracy theories, especially Donald Trump's prediction, if we talk about Donald Trump's prediction, on March 29, Donald Trump predicted that in US there may be more than 100,000 deaths due to COVID-19. And then the number of deaths was only 1,700. And now it is more than 100,000 actually. So how it has been possible, I don't know. But my point is, whatever it is, be it a manually manipulated thing or be it a naturally evaluated thing, the measures that have been taken, that is predominantly the lockdown and the other things, that all have actually helped neoliberalism to breathe at least a little, to buy some time when it was in deep crisis. That is what I will try to show. So first of all, if we think what was the situation before COVID-19 outbreak, because now we know that the entire economy is declining throughout the world. But what was happening before COVID-19 outbreak? Was the entire economy in such a crisis? So I will refer to the chief economist of IMF. It is not myself, it was Geeta Gopinath. Ms. Geeta Gopinath, who is chief economist of IMF. She had written in her blog in July 2019, I am giving the quote, that at 40% of GDP, stock imbalances have reached a historical peak and are 4 times larger than in the early 1990s. That means at that time, in July 2019, the stock imbalances reached its historical peak, and that was at the 40% of the world GDP. So she was predicting that a serious crisis is coming. And then in October 2019, Ms. Kristalina Georgieva, who is chief of IMF now, she told that the global economy is now in a synchronized slowdown. That is what she said. The global economy is now in a synchronized slowdown. So that is what was the situation before this COVID-19 outbreak. So the entire economy was actually depending into crisis. And then COVID-19 came before us. And okay, all the states had to go for lockdown and all that. Now, just a minute. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. You have to select when you go to share screen, then you have to hit another place which says share screen.
Can you see now?
Yeah, now it's okay. Now we can see it. Okay.
So this was the global growth rate. I have shown in percentage change. The blue line is industrial production, and the red line is trade, the international trade. So from January 2017, it is plotted to up to September 2019. So it is showing that before 2020, in fact, before 2020, both the industrial production and the international trade was declining, right? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So how do I back to?
You just have to change your screen, whatever you want to put on the screen. We're seeing the first figure. You can go to second figure by hitting that, getting that on your screen. That's all you have to do.
Okay, so you were being able to see that figure only, okay, right?
Yes, the first figure that you showed is still there. Global growth rate.
You may need to unshare the screen and share it again if you have another screen with the figures, new figures.
Okay. So, okay.
We still have the first figure on.
Okay. It's all right. Okay, I'm coming to the second figure a little later. So, so before we proceed, how this economy, what we call neoliberalism, how we interpret neoliberalism, then I'll come to its crisis. I will try to brief our points on neoliberalism. As Raj mentioned about neoliberalism, the properties of neoliberalism, how generally neoliberalism is conceptualized. But our point is that all these are, whatever is told about neoliberalism, are basically facts, but that does not scientifically interpret what neoliberalism is. So I'm trying to brief on it. Firstly, in our view, it is the newest phase of capitalism, and it is not mere policies. It is generally told that this is a set of policies, but in our view, it is not only the policies, because policies are always adopted due to some compulsions from the ruling class. So it is actually the newest phase of capitalism, and it has a new tendency, a central tendency of producing costly but non-durable products in fewer numbers and smaller numbers. In general, capitalism is known to produce huge products in cheaper prices and all that. But now it is the central tendency of the present economy to produce costly but non-durable products in smaller numbers, and producing these products repeatedly with newer applicative quality. That means updation of these products go on continuously. So this is the very new tendency which has created further other properties of neoliberalism. For example, since now we have costly but limited numbers of products, so these products to be sold out, the policy of the state is to hike the wage of a few and to put austerity for the larger section of the people. Because we know in feudalism, the general principle, the philosophy was to consume less. But in capitalism, because capitalism brought to us huge numbers of products, so the philosophy of capitalism is to consume. It is a consumerist society they have created. But now they have they have been campaigning actually continuously for austerity measures. And they are not only campaigning, they are implementing austerity measures. So this actually, with huge production, austerity does not go. Actually what happens, since the central tendency is to produce costly but non-durable products in smaller numbers, in fewer numbers, so they need fewer people to have that higher level of purchasing power, and they leave the other people in austerity. An important part is that since this needs continuously updation of the products, so it creates a futuristic tendency in the production and also in the trading. That leads to an enhancement of derivative trading in the stock market. So previously we knew that stocks trading means whatever is inventories and the real stocks, the speculation is going on the prices of those stocks. But now actually these stocks, majority of these stocks do not exist really. They are actually on some contract papers and dependent on some production which will be possibly taken place in future. So that is called derivative trading. So it is not a real trading, but trading of the derivatives of the real products. And for that, you need a credit dependent system, because since you are purchasing and trading something which will be produced in future, so now you have to make a credit system. So the entire stocks trading and others completely depend on credit. And final point on this is, since the numbers of products are less, so for a larger market you needed a global market, and a global market with no specific standard of gold. So that is why the Bretton Woods system had fallen, and now we have the foreign trading in the national currencies. You can use dollar, you can use say yen or pound or euro, etc. So with this new situation has evolved. Previously, the crisis of capitalism, as Marx showed, that capitalism suffers its crisis from overproduction, because production is huge, but number of the buyers is the capability of purchasing. That means the purchasing power is less. So I will have overproduction, and that is why the system falls into crisis. That is the simple approach, if we say. But now, when the central tendency is to produce in smaller numbers, then what about the overproduction? The point is, the overproduction is now in time. It is overproduction in time. That means the stocks, what you are trading, that is regarding the future productions. And that is why anyone can assume any value for it in future, right? So that is why the values of virtual stocks, the prices of virtual stocks, they can assume any value, and even they can overpower the real production value. So now the overproduction is in time. It is a temporal overproduction, we can say. And this creates an imbalance between the virtual stocks and the real production. And what happens, that even sometimes the prices of these virtual stocks become much greater than the real production values. For example, I will show you the next figure. Can you see the next figure?
Yes, the
global stocks traded.
Stocks traded. Yes, good.
Yes. So this purple curve that is showing the global stocks traded, and it is as the percentage of the world GDP. So you can see at some points of time, the global stocks traded overpowers the world GDP. Okay, so that is due to these virtual stocks. So virtual stocks can assume a value or price which is much greater than the GDP, that is the real value of the production. And when it happens, then after that, when you have to repay the credited thing, then it collapses. So all the strokes, all the peaks, they are followed by some dips. Okay. And this has been the trend. I will try to, I will actually secure attention on this graph. You can see in 1990 or 92, there was a turbulence. And then in 2000, year of 2000, then in 2008, and then in 2016. So these are actually the crises that is suffered by present day capitalism, that is neoliberalism. That the stocks traded are actually overpowering the real GDP. So that is the overproduction. So this is overproduction in time actually, or we can say a virtual overproduction, whatever we call it. The point is, it will followed by a collapse. I will. I want to let you know that these peaks. This is the curve for world, and they are contributed from all the countries. But the significant contribution of these kinds of crises are shifted from one country to another. For example, in 1990, the crisis was epicentered at Japan. It is commonly known as asset bubble collapse of Japan. And then in 2000, year of 2000, it was epicentered at the US. It is commonly known as, you can remember the Y2K problem, the Y2K issue. That was the computer hardware system will crash, that was created. So that is commonly known as, in economics, this is known as dot-com collapse. Then in 2008, we all know that is the subprime crisis that epicentered at US and some European countries. And then in 2016, such crisis epicentered predominantly in China. I'll come back to this figure again, but before that, so we can see that the epicenter is shifting from, say, Japan to US to Europe to China. So the epicenter is shifting. And now, can you see the next figure?
Yes.
So I have plotted the same graph for different economies. For example, the blue one is for high income countries like US and European Union, the G7 countries, all those. The red one is upper middle income, that means China, Russia, Brazil, they are for the red thing. And the green one is for lower middle income, like India and all others. So you can see the peak of 2000 and 2008. Even in 2008, there was a peak in China or China, Russia, like the upper middle income. And then in 2016, predominantly the peak epicentered at the upper middle income, right? So it has shifted to China. This is actually due to China. I have those data also. I have not shown here. I have data country-wise. So actually, this, we can see that crisis is actually transported from one country to another in each cycle. So first of all, the crisis is coming in almost 8 years period. In 92, in 2000, in 2008, in 2016. So we can predict that the next one, the big crisis is coming possibly in near about 2024. But the point is, the epicenters are shifting. So the crisis is transported, the dominant crisis is shifted from one country to another, is transported from one country to another, and that is going on through the foreign trading. Because the currencies, since the tradings are in currencies, not in gold standard, they are taking place in currencies like dollars and pound and yen, etc. So through these currencies, actually the crisis is also transported. That is a very complex mechanics I have shown in my book chapter, and I previously actually described and discussed it with Raj and others. So now I'm not going to that. The point is, I'm again coming back to the previous graph. The important point is the baseline. I will request you to see the baseline, that is the yellow line. So the problem is the value, the price of stocks are getting much higher than the GDP at some moment, and then it collapses. But now the baseline is increasing to 100%. That means the stocks traded is going to be equal. At the baseline, it is going to be equal to the GDP. So that is a serious problem, and that is why we are we call it an irresolvable contradiction. So that is going to happen now. Now, when this type of stocks traded overpowers the GDP, actually this happens through huge amounts of credits, and that is why when maturity date comes, then the non-performing assets increase, because no one can actually fulfill that difference, because the virtual stocks assumes much higher value than the real production value. So that is why we have non-performing assets, right? So I'll summarize this crisis as, first of all, stocks traded overpowers GDP. Secondly, trading by credit, because it's entirely, it must be traded by credit. And when the maturity dates come in, then crisis occurs predominantly due to NPLs, that is the non-performing assets. So the loans, those are not resolved. Okay, so now you can move to figure 3. Can you see figure 3, the next figure?
Yes.
So here I have shown the domestic credit to private sectors as a percentage of GDP. Okay, so you can see as a percentage of GDP, the credit to the private sectors for higher income countries like US and other G7 countries and European unions, all those, they have already above 100%, much above 100%. Okay, so it is a crisis prone economic region, because the credit, whatever they are giving to the private sector, that is much higher than the GDP. And now you can see the red line, that is the upper middle, especially this curve is highly contributed by China. And you can see from 2008 to 2016, they have increased such credit system very sharply. So that is why the previous curve, you can see this, from 2008 to 2016, the crisis shifted from US and European Union to China. Okay, so that is due to this credit. But now the problem is these imbalances, the stock and real production imbalances, how they could be solved. So what the imperialist or the bourgeois economists, how they try to resolve. What Geeta Gopinath is saying, I again quote from his blog, quote from her blog. What she is saying is, it is natural for young and fastest growing economies to run deficits and borrow from aging advanced economies with weaker growth potential. That means the advanced economies, they have weaker growth potential because they have already been saturated. So, but I mean, that is what was shown by Lenin in his famous work on imperialism, that this higher economies, those we call imperialist countries, they will try to import, they will try to export their capitals to other countries. But the problem is now, what Gopinath is also showing us, that economies that borrow too much and too quickly from abroad may become vulnerable to sudden stops in capital flows. So due to vulnerability, we know in India, in case of India, you can say, there are so many banks, those have very high NPA rates, they are now going through mergers. So banks are in crisis in India. So India cannot afford much loans, much borrowings from the advanced countries, then where will these advanced countries' capitals will go? So that is a big problem from their perspective. So in this situation, this is the situation. Okay, I will show the next curve. Can you see it?
Yes.
So I have plotted the G7 countries. Okay. Oh, I have missed Canada. Canada is also showing the similar graph. Okay. So USA, UK, Germany, France, Japan, and Italy. I'm showing just G7. What is going on with G7 countries? So the blue lines are production index, and the red lines are stocks trading index. Okay. How much stocks are traded? I will ask you to see from 2017 or 18 to 2020. So you can see the production index is either saturated or falling. And the stocks trading index, that is increasing for each of these countries. So that is the imbalance. That is the problem. Okay. So how will they resolve? Now I'm coming to my principal point. What are the capitalists was out? And what this novel coronavirus served them. So first, whatever, I mean, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to comment on anything, whether it is a bioweapon, whether it is manipulated virus, or whether it is naturally evaluated, but what this coronavirus served. So the capitalist way out is first, in this crisis situation, to reduce the overproduction. They will try to reduce the overproduction, especially at the year ending, because they're manifested at the year ending as burdens of sales and all that. So when these kinds of overproduction comes at small scale, what they do? They go for factory lockout. But at large scale, when it is at so large scale, worldwide scale, they had to go for lockdown. So that has served by this COVID-19 first. Secondly, as I've shown, to reduce the stock price, because the stocks are increasing, stocks prices are increasing. They not only have to reduce the overproduction, but they have to reduce the stock prices. What was increasing? I have shown the graph. I am again showing this graph. Yes. So they need to cut the share price also. Now you can see just after 2020, sorry, after 2020, you can see the blue lines and the red lines. Both are falling together sharply through this lockdown. So that is a straightforward manipulation of the production and stocks. Thirdly, as I had said, the crisis is transported from one country to another, one nation to another through foreign trading. So trade manipulation is one required thing for them. And we know the trade wars are going on between US, China, not only US, China, amongst many other countries. And now we know this will continue in the name of this COVID-19. This is already, this is going on. Fourth point, they need to reduce the labor forces, that is the productive force. As Marx said, the maximum product, the highest level of productive force is the laborer itself. So they not only they need to cut the production or the overproduction or the productive equipments, they need to cut the labor stocks, that is the productive forces. And I will again quote from this imperialist economist Gopinath. She said, many countries are now near full employment and have limited room to maneuver their public budgets. That means they need to, they cannot create jobs through this economy, so they need to create some space. So how will they do? Now I will show the next figure. This is what they had in their hand. This, can you see this figure?
Yes.
The migrant stock. So this is the migrant laborers or migrant people as a percentage of the population. So you can see in the higher income countries like G7 countries and European Union and all that. So it is increasing at very high rate. And it is almost I got the data up to 2015, and it is almost 15% of their population now. That is why they actually took the immigration policies. We all know what Donald Trump was saying before this outbreak even. And not only Donald Trump, many other countries, presidents and all the politicians, they were trying to stop immigration because they needed to reduce the labor stocks. And now in the name of COVID-19 transmission, they in the name of stopping, they're fighting COVID-19 transmission, they are saying that will not allow any immigration and will send the migrant people to their home, their homelands, right? So that is what, again, Corona served them. Number 5, at the ultimate condition, even if with all these, if they cannot manipulate the entire thing, what they will do? They need to destruct the productive force by mass killing. That is what happens at the ultimate situation. And in this era of globalization, they need a global mass killing. So we can say through this COVID-19 situation, more than 550,000 deaths worldwide. So this is more than a mass killing. And finally, if nothing works yet, after everything, if nothing works to stop the crisis, to prevent the crisis, then they need to establish a fascist power. That we know that when the financial crisis is such that no general policies are being able to do something for resist that crisis, then they need a fascist power to stop that, to make a control over the entire thing. And for that, we all know that fascism is a counter-revolution, and it has always required a mass campaign thing. It is also a Marx work. So they needed the ultra-social Darwinism. So to establish a fascist power, they needed ultra-social Darwinism. And through this coronavirus thing, globally, they have campaigned a dangerous campaign of social distancing. This will take us to further social Darwinism in future. It may do that. Even after statements from WHO and others that social distancing should not be told, this should be told as physical distancing and all that, they have continuously campaigned for social distancing, and this is still going on. So this is what the capitalists needed and what the coronavirus or COVID-19 served for them. So that is what I have compared. And now we all know they will further transfer the burden of such crises onto the working people by lengthening work hour, reducing employment, as well as reducing the pay, and also huge labor retrenchment and layoffs, whatever they can do. And all this will come in the name of this COVID-19 situation, as if this COVID-19 situation has brought this situation, so we cannot do anything and all that. However, my last point is that after everything, whatever they are doing is to suppress the symptom and not to eradicate the disease, because they cannot. They are capitalists, and capitalists cannot resolve such contradiction because it is the contradiction of the economy itself, of the system itself. And that is why, with such suppression of the symptoms, they are approaching toward their death. And this is the most optimistic thing for us. We are approaching a revolution. But we all know that revolution cannot be successful without the subjective forces to play their role. So we actually need to play our role and to prepare ourselves for the future that is coming very soon. So with that, I will end my talk, and the floor is given to Raj now.
Okay, Basudev, thank you very much for a very exciting presentation, a very stimulating one. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions for you. But so what happens now, I will hand over the floor to Eugene Rule, who will make some announcements. And so there is essentially a couple minutes break when I will step away while Gene takes the floor, and I'll come back and we'll start the question and comment period. Gene? Your microphone needs to be unmuted.
I think Gene.
Okay, yes, thank you. Actually, it's kind of tricky there because I can't unmute myself until you allow me to unmute me. So I just wanted to say that. And also, right now what I'm doing, I hope, is, yes, putting in the chat room how you can give money to our enterprise here, the virtual Marxist library. And maybe I should turn it over to Richard right now to make that statement. Richard, do you want to say anything on that? Or should I just keep going? Well, when Richard gets ready to jump in, Richard Fallenbaum is our treasurer.
Yeah, go ahead, Gene. I think you made the point. I think the instructions are pretty clear. You can make a contribution. Well, let me just make the information is clear, I think. But we need to raise the money to support the library, the work of the library particularly, which I'm sure is in a very difficult position. So normally when we're meeting in the library, people give a few dollars, but each week. But the pattern now is that people give a donation maybe once a month or once every 2 months. So this may be the time for you to do it, and I make it a somewhat more substantial donation. We very much appreciate it. That's all for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you will all have ample opportunity to do this as we speak or after we close. So thank you for that. And just remind you that we're going to switch to Q&A and comments and so forth for the until the next hour, basically. And then we will end the formal program. But normally we leave the room open for another half hour until 1 o'clock, I believe. Is that right, Mehmet?
Yes, we do, if people want to chat with each other.
We have some rather productive discussions, and we do record that, but people are freer to ramble on at that point. So I want to just remind people about that. And next week we have a fascinating group discussion on what is neoliberalism, and this will be introduced by a ICSS member who has yet to be identified. But we will talk about various ideas on neoliberalism. Then we'll move to the July 26th, the question of is China socialist? And another ICSS member will lead this discussion. And then on August 2nd, Tony Ryan will speak on Cuba and international health solidarity. And then we keep on going. So our future programs are all on our webpage, icssmarks.org, under future programs. So anyway, so I will end there and turn it back over to Alan, I guess.
Actually, I'll be moderating.
Okay.
Raj, before you go, let's have a little technical reminder that if people want to ask a question or make a comment, please go to the participants window you have. The participants tag is under the window at the bottom. And when you go into that window, you'll see at the bottom, raise hand. So if you can please do that, Raj will see who wants to speak and it puts you on the stack. If you are on the phone, please try *9 to raise your hand and *9 again to lower it if you after you have spoken. Thank you.
Okay, and Alan is co-moderator. You know, in other words, we're a team. Alan will keep track. 2 minutes is the limit of time for each participant to either ask a question or make a comment. And please keep your comments pertinent to the subject of today, not to subjects that are not of today. I'll appreciate it if this is to respect our speaker who will try to answer it. And we're not going to ask our speaker to stay past the time of 12:30 for us, which is 1 o'clock in the morning, so late night for him. So with the first question, we're going to go to Richard Wright, and I'm asking him to unmute so he can ask his question or make a comment.
I've come to know how to unmute really well now. I gotta say I had a big problem with the whole presentation. In particular, it relied very much on stock market as a stand-in, if you will, for the economy. And this is basically what I heard was what I've been hearing, what I could listen to on CNBC for they're basically traders that make the same kind of analysis. The problem with the stock market as a stand-in is a number of things. For one thing, the initial presentation of industrial production leaves out the fact that in the advanced economies, increasingly, you're seeing more of the economy being directed toward service industries, and that wasn't reflected in the stock. The stock market data does not take into effect a large measure of private companies that do not offer stock. For example, Archer Daniels Midland is a very big example. They're one of the largest grain producers in the world, and they've got a whole different set of problems. So the other thing I had, I took down a bunch of notes, I have to say. The other problem is the initial slide. What it really reflected in, first off, it had
10 seconds.
10 seconds?
Yeah.
I'll just shut up right there then. Thank you.
Okay.
Basudev, you want to respond to it, please?
Unmute yourself, Basudev.
We can't hear you, Basudev. Are you going to respond to this comment?
Can you hear?
Yes,
Yes.
you're on.
I actually could not really understand what he is trying to say. What I got is he is talking possibly about the service industries, right? Is it so?
Yeah, he's saying that service industry is not reflected by and large in the stock market, and your presentation is so focused on the stock market, which is he could go to any of the bourgeois programs on television which talk about stock values, etc. So he's saying, where is the Marxist analysis in a way? That's his critique of your presentation.
Okay. So first of all, if you talk about the service industries, for Marxist analysis, you first need to know that everything today, whatever the goods or services, whatever is produced, they all are
Alan, your sound is coming in. Alan, did you?
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Basudev.
Okay, so for today, you have to, in the present era, you have to consider this, that whatever it is, the goods or service, whatever it is produced, it is counted in the stock market predominantly. Since Lenin's era, when Lenin started his new work on Marxism, since then, the finance market is dominating the entire production market. That is, whatever it is, goods or services, whatever is produced. I can show you, I have also the graphs of the service industries. That is, that all those are counted in these production sectors. Okay, when I'm talking about the production indices, that is, I have only shown one graph that has been shown by Gita Gopinath, that is the chief economist of IMF. That is the only graph where industrial production has been shown. In the rest of my curves, whatever I have plotted, all those have shown production in general, not only the industrial production, also the other kinds of production, because we all know that service industry contributes much larger than the so-called other industries today. So that all have been considered, and especially today, the biggest, the top 10, if you consider top 10 companies of world. So today, all of them are either service industries or financial companies. So what they have gained in this situation, they are also counted in share markets. They are also counted in stock markets. So you have to consider that. And for Marxist analysis, you have to analyze the stocks in reality. How these bourgeois economists, they are talking about the policies. And what we are talking about, that this is not, whatever neoliberalism is, that is not policy regime. That does not belong to only policy regime. They adopt some policies, but that is due to their compulsions. So that is how Lenin also interpreted about imperialism. Kautsky said that imperialism is a policy. Lenin showed that it is not a policy, and the book titled, entitled as The Highest Stage of Capitalism. So that imperialism is a stage of capitalism. It is not a policy. Similarly, we are showing that neoliberalism is not a policy. It is a stage. It is a newer phase. And that is why this is happening. We are showing why this stock market trading, especially the derivative tradings, are coming in. And what is its relation with the real production. And that is coming from the very nature of the new production system. That is what we call the temporal mode of production, that you actually need updation of your goods or services, whatever you consume. So that is the tendency today. And the entire thing is related to this futuristic scheme.
Okay, I have a follow-up question to you or comment. But before I do say that, Jean, will you permit me to do that? Your hand is raised. Is that okay? Jean, because it's related. The thing is that my question to you is, capitalist mode of production also involves a petty capitalist mode of production.
Right.
And this petty capitalist mode of production, my question is, how is this accounted for in your analysis? And is it substantial? I know that capitalism as it developed tries to destroy. On the other hand, state tries to preserve because otherwise they have political crises. And in India, that demonetization was related to this phenomenon. So please explain that a little bit, because there is this petit bourgeois mode of production in the whole world. How is that related to in your analysis? Thank you.
It's a very good question, Raj, and it's very important today. And actually, in the next chapter of my book, as we have you have read it 3 or 4 chapters possibly.
Yeah, 3. I've read 3.
Yeah. So the next chapter is on this: how in the present era, this petty production, how is that related to the entire capitalist production system? Because many people are working on that. As you know about, possibly you know about Prabhat Pattanayak's book on this. But his model is actually what Rosa Luxemburg shown. That is actually modified for today, but principally it is dependent. It is based on that model. But our interpretation is completely different. The point is, today, the larger capitalist groups or monopolies, the giant systems, they can extract surplus from the petty bourgeois, the petty production systems. And that is a very complex way, that is a very complex mechanism. In fact, that is happening through a very uncommon process actually showed by Marx, but that is not very, I will say, that is not very campaigned from the Marxists. And some academicians, they have worked on it, but majority of them have criticized Marx. That is the value to price transformation theory. That is a very famous theory given by Marx. Actually, he had given it in Capital Volume 3. But that has been challenged by many bourgeois economists, and then the Marxist academicians also accepted the bourgeois criticisms. Even Paul Sweezy belonged to them.
But there are some who have defended Marx also later on.
Yes, but we have shown that this value to price transformation theory can be extended to interpret, to analyze the present era, how the from petty production, the surpluses, a significant fraction of surpluses are transferred to the larger corporations. So that is, I can simply, because that is a very big work, but I can simply tell you in one sentence that according to this value to price transformation system, the theory, the total value, whatever it is produced, and the prices, what are set by the corporations, prices are set on only one principle, that is how much I have invested. So that is what we call the rate of profit. So if I invested $100, I will get a profit of $10. And if someone invests, say, $200, then he or she will get $20 as a profit. But in such cases, generally in case of petty productions, those are labor-intensive productions. So actually the value created by them is much larger than their prices with this formulation. And for the giant corporations, they actually invest less in the workers. That is due to that organic composition of capital. The organic composition of capital is much larger for the larger corporations, the giant corporations. So they invest less on the laborers, and that is why the total surplus value is also less, but their prices are high because of that average rate of profit. So in this way, actually the surplus values created at the petty sections, a fraction of that is transferred to the larger corporations through the chain of economy.
Maybe more than a fraction.
Yes, definitely. It is much more than a fraction.
Yeah. Okay. You finished with that? So I'll go to the next person.
Yeah.
Okay. Jean, you are next.
Yes, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Let me just say that, as an academic, I've spent most of my life teaching anthropology and Marxism. And during that time, I've developed a certain skepticism towards a lot of academic discourse. And it was noted here that neoliberalism used to be called Reaganomics and also voodoo economics. So I think George Bush came up with that one. But, Reaganomics, it was Jesse Jackson that gave us the definition of Reaganomics. He said, according to Reaganomics, the problem is rich people don't got enough money. According to Reaganomics, the problem is poor people got too much money. So once you understand the problem, the solution is clear. You take from the poor and you give to the rich. It's known as Robin the Hood. And that is the essence of neoliberalism. And I agree, one needs to study bourgeois economics to understand precisely how we're getting screwed, because we are indeed getting screwed. But all I need to do is take just a short walk, a couple of blocks from my nice, comfortable, middle-income home here in Oakland, and see these 10 cities, tens of thousands of people are living in their tents without any kind of job. And so for me, that simply refutes the entirety of bourgeois economics. And again, how one articulates the labor theory of value with bourgeois theories of, bourgeois theories is a difficult matter. And I think is very worthwhile. And thank you for your discussion of this, because it was very helpful for me. So thank you.
Okay, you want to respond to that, Basudev? You have something to say?
No, I must thank him and whatever he said. Yes, definitely a bourgeois system means that it is collecting some money from the poor and give it to the rich. That is the basic principle. But we need to know in much deeper way how today they are playing, the system is playing. So if we cannot understand analytically how they work, how the system works, we cannot scientifically predict what is going to happen. And we cannot make ourselves prepared, because finally we are not academicians, we are activists. And for activists, it is very much important to predict what is going to happen, by and large, at least. So that is why we need we need to do much more on this. I do think that.
Okay, we'll go to Richard Fallenbaum, but just one thing I want to leave it with you in the same regard, which is taking it from the poor and giving it to the rich is rather not correct as far as capitalism is concerned. It's more complicated because it is not the absolute poverty that increases, but relative poverty. And that's how oftentimes, because the previous model of Keynesianism balanced it, so people, even the working class in the United States, felt their lives are improving as the lives are improving in China, and that just kind of justifies it, that kind of system. So I'll go with that to Richard Fallenbaum, and you can respond to that.
There's absolute immiseration within blocks of my house.
Yeah, yeah. I know,
are absolutely immiserated.
I know,
It's
Gene.
getting worse. So
I'm not saying.
point that out.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying this depends on the model, right? And the previous model wasn't there, was still capitalism. So let's go to Richard Fallenbaum. That's the only comment I was making. Come back and critique me. So Richard Fallenbaum, you're next.
Well, I wonder if you could go back to the basic thesis, because I'm still not clear on it. You said that we're in a new stage of capitalism beyond imperialism to neoliberalism, and I don't quite understand what the features of that new stage are. Imperialism was the domination of finance capital, and that still seems to hold. But you said, and this is what I'm not clear about. You talked about the tendency to produce more expensive and I think non-durable goods that you said, and then there was a third feature that I didn't get, and I wonder if that is the defining feature of this new stage of capitalism, and could you elucidate for how is that important, and how does it even happen? How does it even happen that this? When you said that, I was thinking of Apple computer, which produces these very high-end computers and phones and so forth as an example. But I didn't know. I don't know whether it's a general feature of capitalism now. Anyway, it's still unclear to me exactly what the new stage is. Thank you.
Okay, and before you start, let me say the next questioner is Sharon Rose. So please go ahead, Basudev, please respond to this question and comment.
Yes, actually, this talk was not on the detail of the model of neoliberalism, how we interpret it. I have just given a brief on the points. So I can send you the links of the chapters I have written on this. Those can give you the detail. I can just say a few words that generally capitalism is thought of producing huge numbers of products. That is, if you even recall Communist Manifesto, there also it has been clearly said that capitalism has brought us huge numbers of products. So, and that is actually also the origin of its crisis that comes from the overproduction. That is, it produces huge numbers of products, but the purchasing power of the people that does not raise. So crisis comes from that overproduction. Now, if you actually look into the present data, since say 1960s to hitherto to till date, you can see for even for USA, for UK, or for other European Union countries, or for China even, that the inventories means whatever is not sold. So those inventories as a percentage of their production values, those inventories are decreasing significantly. So how is that possible? That means overproduction is reducing. Overproduction is decreasing. So is that Marx is wrong about his overproduction theory, or capitalism has resolved its overproduction crisis? No, it is not. Actually, what happened, the central tendency of the production has changed. The central tendency, the majority of the products, especially from the giant corporations, they have actually turned their production scheme to expensive and less durable products, and which will exhibit continuous repetition and updation in each and every product, from FMCG to mobile to cars, everything. So the point is, with this, we have actually, in material terms, we have no overproduction or less overproduction. So is that capitalism is not facing any crisis now? Because since fewer products are there, at least which constitute the maximum share of the production value. So if those suffer, if those do not suffer overproduction, then the overproduction problem is partially at least resolved. But the thing is not so. In fact, with this expensive and less durable things, the production scheme becomes futuristic. That means everyone knows that in coming 6 months we'll have a new product, and this creates a futuristic trade. And with that, before production, much before production, the corporations and the speculators and the financiers, they actually come to create some contracts, some bonds, and those bonds are sold and traded in prices, in high prices, and in much higher prices even than the real production values. And that may be so larger that the total globally traded stocks, the value of globally traded stocks can overpower the world GDP. So that is the range of today's capitalism. So overproduction, so what is this overproduction? So these stocks are set for futures. So actually this is overproduction in time. What in our academic words we call the previous days overproduction was overproduction in ensemble, because the production scheme was in ensemble. There are many replicas of the same thing, but now we have limited numbers of replicas, but we will change it in time. That is their scheme. So the ensemble mode of production, that was the previous mode of production, is now changed into the temporal mode of production, that will change in time. So overproduction problem also changed to a temporal thing. So that is why these stocks are actually virtual stocks. When they assume a price, the real production value is much less than that. And that creates, so for that, if we have the total products of say $300, and if we have traded stocks on that, which assumes say $3,000, so what will happen? Someone has to borrow, someone has to give credits, and then when the maturity dates to repay the credit, when the maturity date will come in, then what happens? If you do not have that much amount of production, which will actually never happen, so the entire thing will collapse. So that is what is happening. That is what in a form manifested as subprime crisis in 2008, but that also manifested in 2000 as the dot-com collapse, and that has manifested in 2016 as the Chinese stock market turbulence. So it is the same thing that is repeating, a crisis that is coming in almost 8-year cycle due to this thing. So this is the neoliberal age of production. This is very new thing from the previous days. And definitely it does not mean that the principal point what Lenin raised, that the financial oligarchy, that has not been gone anywhere. That is there, but the form is changed. In Lenin's time, the important part was capital export from the imperialist countries, but now they also seek imports of capitals. They also seek for FDI inflows. So that is a new feature that is coming due to this new age situation. And also say, for example, how one to another countries are connected. Say India is exporting some product to US. So it will export, it will make its trade by US dollars. Now, for simplicity, I'm saying that if the US, in US, its domestic products are, say, less than the money in circulation, then they will face then US will face an inflation, right? But now if India purchases India actually exports some product to US, then dollar will come from US to India, and that will go to the central bank, that is Reserve Bank of India, and Indian money will come to its domestic market. That will enhance the inflation of India. So actually, inflation is transported from US to India through this foreign trading. This is just an example. During serious crisis, actually the crisis with this stock market and derivative trading, one important instrument of derivative trading is this currencies. So with these currencies, the crisis can be transported from one nation to another. So these are the new features. And that is why the international wars are the last options. Rather, they will try something at if very difficult situation for them, they will try something different.
Okay, so I think it's Sharon Rose who's next, and I'm going to step out for a minute. And Alan, could you take over while I'm out?
Sure.
Sharon, please go ahead with your comment or question.
Well,
I'll be right back.
actually, you just answered my question. It had to do with the definition of in-time overproduction. And now I think I understand it much better, so I don't have another question.
Okay, so then I will throw the question next one before I step out, because I don't see any hands raised.
Well, actually, I think Mehmet had wanted to raise a
Mehmet
question
has, so
earlier.
go ahead, Mehmet, and I'll come back with my comment or question.
Okay, thank you guys, and especially thank you, Basudev, for a very interesting and thought-provoking presentation. Now, you mentioned several remedies that the neoliberals would go to either, let's say, hide it or make it easier for them to get through the crisis. Like you mentioned, fascism is one, which I agree with you 100%. But in the past, the capitalists have used different types of, remedies as well. And the first one that comes to mind is war. I'm surprised you have not mentioned war as an alternative that they may bring, especially with the nuclear weapons, because it hits many birds with one stone. It reduces the population, and it completely destroys the means of production. And so it's a heaven-sent solution for them. So do you want to get into why there has not been a war yet? Or do you see a big threat of a war in the near future? Thanks.
That's a very good question, in fact. What I have said that from Lenin's time to this time, one principal difference is that now we have transnational companies. We have a company, say a Japanese company that has a headquarter in the US. So we have many companies which have their foreign shares much more than their domestic shares. So this is the age of transnational companies, and since it is actually their issues, whatever they are doing is their issues. It is not the entire capitalist system that try to resolve its problem. It never happens in capitalism, because capitalist system itself is a Darwinist system. it always, the monopolies, the major forces, they will try to suppress the others and raise their own profits. So due to this transnational thing, war will be the last option for them. In our views, the war will be the last option for them due to this global thing. Now it is a globalized world, not due to that capital is transmitting from one nation to another. That is happening since 100 years. But the point is, now we have transnational companies, those run the inter-capitalist system. So if internation wars begin, then it will be not so fruitful for, maybe not so fruitful for them for now. But if they have no option further, then they will go for war. So what we are predicting, that 2024 is going to be possibly, that may be 1 year sooner or 1 year later, but the point is 2024, according to this prediction, this 8-year cycle, after 2016, the next periodic crisis is possibly coming near about 2024. So before that, they are for this intermediate crisis period, they are trying something different. How they can utilize whatever is going on, how they can utilize to manipulate their thing. I have said that this is just to buy some time. This is not their ultimate thing, what they have done. This is just to buy some time. But definitely it can bring war in sooner future. It really can. And that is really very dangerous, and that may also lead to the establishment of fascist forces in many countries, many advanced countries. We can see now the very ultra right-wing upliftment, but that is a serious danger for us.
So Richard Wright has his hand up, but he has spoken before. So before I can give him second chance, I want to ask whoever has not yet spoken, they get a first chance. So does anybody else wants to go ahead of Richard? Otherwise, I'll go to Richard. I think I will ask my question a little later on. Richard, please go ahead. I'm going to lower the hand, and you please unmute yourself. We can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
That's better.
Oh, okay, now.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Once again, I have a real problem with using the stock market as a proxy of a capitalist production. For one thing, as was pointed out earlier, I don't know if it was Gene or who was, but there's a lot of doctors out there that are not listed on the stock market, that are, that make money, that are feeling the ups and downs. There's a lot of restaurants out there that are certainly the dumps right now, not because of the stock market, but because of the coronavirus. So this whole use of the stock market as a proxy for production is really sort of pointless, especially given that I think they're estimating that less than 50% here in the United States of the workers in this country have any interest in the stock market, either directly or through their retirement accounts. So I'm this whole thing about okay. So anyways, okay, I'll stop there.
You want to comment on that, Basudev?
No, if it is his opinion, I have nothing to say.
Okay. So essentially I'll go there because I don't see any hand up. Or am I wrong? Alan, do you see any hands up?
No, go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, okay. So my question, I think Richard asked you, so is it a stage higher than what Lenin described as the highest stage? And what I heard from you say, no, it fits into the highest stage of capital because it is still the finance capital domination, but it is a change in character because of what you described. So it should not be, because Lenin predicted, more or less anticipated the Second World War through his book. And he said the world is divided among the handful of rich nations, and this division is for maximizing, their monopoly capital's profits, and only a redivision, which is what Germany attempted twice, First World War and then Second World War. And so this, what you're describing is if this is true, is really a definition of a change in character of imperialism, and it has implications for those who are fighting to overthrow capitalism. And I think that's what you're saying, if I understand it right. But the idea of a war not happening, you have ascribed primarily to the transnational character of capital now. But actually the administration of this whole thing is still centered in Washington, D.C. Okay, so a nation state of the United States, and without nation state, capital does not function. So that, so there is a contradiction between the two. It's apparent contradiction.
10 seconds.
Between, transnational capital wanting outside of it and national. Could you please address that? And do the nuclear weapons, the fact that nobody is safe in starting a war, is that also a factor? Thank you.
Yes, that's a very good question, right? In fact, now what we think, the contradiction is multifaceted. Because first of all, the transnational companies are there and they need capitals to flow without any barrier. That is one thing. But with this, the nation states are not abolishing their existence or insistence. Because what I have said, and also imperialism still exists. Many, even among Marxists, some people have said that with globalization, imperialism has died out. But that is not true. As I have said, that one nation can transport its crises, its economic problems to others through this foreign trading. And in this way, one can even extract surplus from other nations through the economic mode. Imperialism in so-called sense is the forceful occupation. But with forceful occupation, they need forceful occupation. US needs, in many states, they need military interventions. But along with that, the economic mode, that can help them to extract huge surplus from worldwide. For example, as I have described, a giant corporation can extract surplus from the petty productions. In a similar manner, similar fashion, the advanced economies can extract surplus from the lower and middle income economies in the same manner. So it is a contradiction between these transnational companies, transnational businesses, and it is a contradiction inherent in them. It is not that it is a contradiction only between the transnational companies and some national companies. No, it is not like that. It is a contradiction amongst themselves. that one transnational company can make its profit due to this globalization thing, this capital flow without any barrier. But also it needs if some company is from belonging to advanced economy, it will try to suppress a transnational company from the lower economy, because then only it can extract surplus from it. So it is in this way it is a multifaceted contradiction, and they will try to as I have said, the war will be their last option. But definitely they in fact they used to be practiced in wars in some other places. For example, if you I can say very little on this because this is a vast subject, that during Cold War, it is generally said that during Cold War the wars were stopped and it was just between Soviet Union and US imperialism, that was a cultural and production related struggles between them, competition between them. But in fact, in that period, many other third world countries, hello,
Yes,
can
we
you
can
hear
hear.
me? Okay, so with
Yes.
yes, so then in many third world countries, in there actually many wars were actually being
We've lost the transmission momentarily.
Yeah, he's
Folks,
frozen.
At least I have.
He's
It's
frozen.
frozen.
Yeah, he may come back.
Yeah, I know. Basudev, we don't hear you. I don't know if you're able to hear us, but we're not able to hear you. I think there's a problem with internet connectivity. I got the message that the connection is unstable, and then it went out. Fortunately, we have substantially covered the period that was intended for it. So what we can do while we don't have that, we can have our discussion going on. And what should we do, Mehmet? What do you suggest?
Yeah, let's keep on discussing it. If he joins, I'm
is it from our end
for his reconnection. But if anybody else wants to speak or wants to discuss further, I think it will be good.
Yeah. So in your opinion, the problem is at his end, right? Not our end.
I believe so. And
because
his
we're
connection,
able to talk to each
exactly. His connection dropped as well. He was there for a while, frozen, but then the whole connection dropped. Yeah. So I'm watching for that.
Yeah. He'll have to re-sign. I can call him and tell him try again to be on. Although we have only 10 minutes remaining, 12 minutes remaining. Let me call him.
Yes, that may help.
You guys can continue. I will mute my phone, my speaker, and you guys can discuss. I will hear you.
I think Eugene's hand is up. Is that right, Eugene? Gene? Okay, anybody else that wants to go?
Unmuted. Oh. Okay, am I on now?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, it's a little tricky there. Anyway, I wanted to jump in here on a number of points. One is just to note that the fact that something is a stage of development, it does not mean it's not also a policy. It can be simultaneously a policy and a stage. But what I want to talk about is, again, war, because this is an aspect of imperialism that has never gone away. Since World War II, there has been a constant state of war of the United States against the rest of the world, which began immediately after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, when United States basically sent troops to South Korea to occupy that country. And then we had Vietnam. And so the total cost, human cost of wars since World War II had been over 30 million people have been killed by US inspired wars. That is more than were fought in World War I. So I think we need to bear this in mind when we're talking about war. And again, Marx says somewhere that, capitalism only solves one crisis by laying the groundwork for a deeper and more thoroughgoing crisis. And this is what's happening with the warfare state. We are actually could be annihilated at any time through, and the United States is sending, two aircraft carriers with a whole fleet of subs and destroyers and so forth into the South China Sea. I hope they don't also go into the Gulf of Tonkin. I hope there's not another Gulf of Tonkin resolution coming out of this. But it's a very dangerous situation, and I think we need to bear that in mind. This is one of the ways that imperialism, capitalism, solves its problems, but only by creating more deeper and more thoroughgoing problems. So I will pause that and let someone else take over.
2 minutes. Good.
Got it. I'm getting training myself.
Pretty good. Let's see. Why don't we go with Sharon? I'll unmute you.
Thank you. I just wanted to throw into the discussion another contradiction. I think that there may very well be some kind of major skirmish or attack on China in the South China Sea. It looks like they're getting ready. They're building up. I agree with that. I'm not trying to contradict that. But I think also the United States, the US capital, I should say, needs China for many reasons. One is that China holds a very large piece of the US debt. China owns a lot of US treasuries, and that debt finances the bribe of the upper strata of the working class, the labor aristocracy of this country. We are bribed. In other words, another way to say that is that the Chinese working class supports the upper strata of the US working class, the lifestyle that we have been bribed with all its limitations. So I just think that contradiction needs to be part of our understanding of how international capital works.
Thank you. By the way, our speaker is back on. Can you unmute him, Mehmet? So he's here. And now we can direct a question or comments to him. He's able to sign back on. So,
what name is he under, Raj? What name is he under?
Basudev, thank you for joining.
Sohini Saha, he's unmuted.
It's an old name, which is Saha, Sohini Saha. Sohini Saha. Yeah, he's not muted. He can speak.
Yes, yes.
Welcome back, Basudev.
Yes, so
okay, so any questions or comments on Basudev's presentation further, please? Who wants to ask him another question? Basudev, you want to say something before I ask others to do it? You were speaking at that time, so you want to finish your thought or add something to it?
Yes, what I was saying that, oh yes, about the wars. Even the war tactics for this imperialist team has changed from the previous direct wars. Rather, they have already experienced indirect wars. So those kind of wars are still going on. You can see in Syria and in Middle East. You can actually, those wars are amongst these imperialist forces, because all the forces within those countries, those are backed by these imperialist forces. So actually, these imperialist forces are already continuing wars amongst them, but definitely in indirect way. So that is also a new form that we have experienced in last 20 years.
Okay, before I go to two people whose hands are raised, I want to give a chance to anybody who has not spoken so far, if they want to ask a question and make a comment, because our attendees are still 24, and the number of people who are commenting are limited. So, if nobody comes up, I will go next to Richard Wright, and then to Jean, followed by Jean. Richard, please unmute yourself, and I'll lower your hand.
I am unmuted, I think. this new way of doing things. I wanted to agree with two, Sharon and Jean, I think, that for me, well, as I was just writing, I have a friend who's Chinese who pays attention to the news coming out of Taiwan, and what she's reporting to me is that there's a lot of military sales that are being dumped into Taiwan right now, in spite of the agreements that we've got with China. And when you put that together with what's going on in Hong Kong, I'm inclined to believe that our next war, and I wouldn't be surprised if this happened before the elections, would be with China, which I think would be a mistake. But in any case, that's my opinion.
Okay, so Basudev, you want to say something about war with China, how it fits into your talk or not, whatever is your floor.
Yes, actually, we all know about the trade war that is going on with China. US-China trade war is now even in the mainstream news. So that is going on. And as I have shown that the crisis has been transported from the higher economies to the emerging economies, like from US and EU to China now. And even after that, if you see, China with its very large infrastructure, with its very huge labor forces, and still they have some a state-controlled economy. They can manipulate their. I'm not saying that China is going on with a socialist policy or something like that. No, at least from macroeconomic point of view, what China is doing is capitalist economy, and it is neoliberalism. But even after that, China has some tendencies due to its state-controlled economy and huge labor forces and already what productive forces they have developed, they can manipulate their crisis in some different way. For example, in 2008, China also experienced that 2008 crisis, but it did not affect it much because it took some different kinds of policies. For example, they have invested more in the infrastructures. So whatever the unemployment that caused by that subprime crisis, those equivalent numbers, that is a capitalist policy, that is not a socialist policy, but those equivalent numbers of retrenchment, those equivalent number of people were absorbed in those expansion of railways and like these kinds of industries. So even still China can do something like that, but US and European Union, most of them cannot do, because they are already saturated. So due to this reason, there is a significant importance of this trade war. And China is also trying to politicize its many countries behind it. They are trying to set some different kinds of banks also. So they are trying to polarize many other countries behind them. So that is a part of political thing, how they will manipulate this situation. But definitely in case of direct war, I'm still not assuming that direct war is coming so soon, that within this year, I don't think so. But definitely what I have said, indirect wars are going on, and direct war will be the last option, but they can happen, because whatever the crisis is coming nearby 2024, so that can lead to anything.
Okay, since I don't see any other hand, Jean is the next on the list. Please, Jean, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, on China, again, I'm also in Veterans for Peace, and our local chapter has been very active in the struggle against the China bashing that's been going on so vocally. And we have some people over in Chinatown also. Our San Francisco chapter is involved there. And we're doing a workshop. We have our national convention coming up early August. And we're doing a workshop on pivot to peace with China and the world. And this is going to be a national campaign, we hope, that we're going to talk the national organization into coming along with, because basically our point is, you know, we need to get away from confrontation and competition, quit defining China as a competitor, adversary, and struggle for peace and cooperation, which is possible. But it's not a bipartisan affair. China bashing is a bipartisan affair here in the United States. And that sailing of these American warships is totally unnecessary, because there's no problem with freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. And, you know, who would win a war between China and the United States is unclear, and I just hope we never find out. So that's all I have to say on that.
Okay, so our time allotted for the program formally is ending. I want to ask Basudev if he has any final thoughts, take a minute or two to present them. Then we'll go into informal, and you're, of course, Basudev, welcome to stay, even though it's 1 o'clock. So it's up to you. We'll not push you to stay, but you're welcome to stay. We're going to continue informal conversation among the group in the next 25 minutes at 1 o'clock our time, which is 1:30 a.m. in India. This comes to actually an end. So it's now informal, but before we go there, Basudev, any final things you want to say? Take a minute or two, please go ahead.
Just one thing to say, the last commenter, I did not remember his name.
Jean.
Yeah, Jean. So I really want to thank him, because now we need to actually prepare ourselves for peace campaign worldwide. And that is definitely one important task for Marxist-Leninists, for communists. And the peace work, the struggle for peace, and also against the social chauvinism and nationalist chauvinism like that. Because since we know that this situation is coming If not today, if not tomorrow, then day after it will come. So we need to prepare ourselves, and the struggle for peace is going to be very important, not only for to stop these wars, but also to make a revolutionary situation in our favor, because all the peace struggles have also important impacts on the revolutionary struggles. That is what Lenin showed us, and I think that is our future path. That should be our future path. Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. A vote of thanks to Vasudev for this very invigorating session. And as all new ideas are, there always will be controversies about them and rigorous discussion among Marxists. So I will look forward to you coming back in the future. And with this, we go to informal. Anybody else who wants to make a comment informally, please go ahead. And it's not going to be so structured. So, Basudev, you're welcome to stay also.
And I'm going to stop recording, Raj.
I think Jean's wanted us to continue recording even the informal.
Okay, that's fine. We can.
Okay. So if unless people say they want to talk only if it is not recorded, I think we should continue recording. So who else wants to comment? Alan, you Marxist economist, you have to have some comments. I mean, others too. Okay, we have one from Rich Johnson. So I will call upon Rich to lower his hand. And Rich, you are next for your comment.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. I want to say two things. They're sort of interrelated and they're low level. But anyway, I want to first thank you very much. I really appreciated this presentation, discussion. I noticed, not counting exactly, but about 4 or 5 people, comrades were speaking to the question with ideas adding to the conversation or interacting with his, I'm sorry, I can't say his name, for his assertion.
Basudev.
Yeah, I just can't even hear your name, your voice, Raj, but thank you. I need to see it written down to get it. Anyway, but I do want to say this. I did not speak during the program. This is the post program. And I'll tell you the reason. This talk was over my, I loved it, but it was stretching me. And I think we actually went up a level. We made a leap or something, that the intensity of both the lecture or the ideas that our comrade brought with him, and then the interaction with him, some things that people said, like war, etc., seemed to be kind of missing, but he accepted them, and we all know that. I was just really impressed. And so I felt like if I was to say something at that time, it would lower the discussion. I wanted to keep it up there. I thought it's not that I'm not capable of understanding what they're saying, but it's stretching me. And it's in the level, for me, in the realm of political economy, that we're lacking a lot. And I'm glad that we're in there now. And I think we're all going to have a lot to learn and I hope we can, with when he comes back, when he's invited back, and with other speakers, we can reach this again. I was just totally impressed, and I've been waiting for this, hoping for it, and not really prepared myself to make it happen. But I'm really, I have to say, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Very, very encouraging comment from you. Gulden is next. Gulden, please unmute and go ahead.
Hello. I really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much. I just wanted to mention that I worked for one of these internationals, Bank of America, before I got retired. And frequently the higher ups said that we are not a US corporation. They were saying that we belong to the entire world. This is the word that I frequently heard from them. Bank of America has lots of branches in China, China mainland, even Hong Kong and Macau and everywhere. And even Bank of America sold few of its branches to China main bank for about $1.5 billion each few years back. So mostly I've been reading on the media right now. Bank of America is complaining about how this trade war with China is hurting them, and frequently criticizing President Trump for furthering this trade war. So this is where the corporation's point of view, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not sure how they're going to let another world war between the states in the circumstances. So that's all my comment is.
Thank you. Who's next? Anybody jumps in? And Basudev, if you want to react, feel free to do that.
Yeah.
Anybody can jump in. That's the informal
So
session.
now, I think now I need to listen.
Oh, we can't hear you.
Okay. He wants to listen. He says he wants to listen. So who is next? Alan, you're missing from comment, and so is Norma missing from the comment. So is everybody else who has not spoken. So I hope others will jump in. I want to say, while I'm waiting for it, that I ran a small business as a consulting engineering business for about 30 years in San Francisco. And I could experience the sucking out of profit, surplus value from that little operation. We were just marginal. What was left was just enough to survive on. Sometimes profit, sometimes loss. And I think I'm pretty much a representative of the petty bourgeois business in America that just lives, and few of them make it to the capitalist class. Of course, I had no ambition to be in the capitalist class. I rather wanted to go the other way. And as an immigrant, I had to fend for a big family's obligation. So I had to do this. But yeah, so I can feel the how they dip into it. In my case, it was the landlord, it was the insurance company, and insurance companies, several of them, and landlord, and the big business that squeezed us, means our clients. They were big business. So I could feel it in my guts, you know, because so I understand the plight of the petty bourgeoisie who wants to be, on one side, he wants to be identified with capitalism, part of his or her interest is with capitalism. And on the other hand, is the other leg is in the working class. So that's a walking contradiction that middle class is. And yet it is very important in the revolution and also counter-revolution. So therefore, you know, much of the struggle, Lenin succeeds in tying this middle class, which is peasant class largely, was a brilliant achievement. In India, it was achieved by Gandhi on behalf of the capitalist class of India, emerging capitalist class. So that's why India's went a different way. So I think Rich wants to say something. I'll shut up. Rich, is it Rich or somebody on the phone is killing? Yeah, it's Rich.
No. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Rich.
Oh, okay, you can hear me. Well, so I only have to speak to Mehmet this time because he said it clearly that when you put your hand up from the telephone Remember, I'm representing all telephone users only. Not, in other words, not people with computers who can't see hands and stuff. I can only raise my hand with *9. I'll say this one more time. I cannot lower my hand with *9. I don't care what the instructions say. I've tried it many times. The only way my hand gets lowered after I spoke 5 minutes ago, whatever, is for someone at the center to lower my hand. After someone with a telephone.
Rich, I have a suggestion. Let's discuss this tomorrow in our steering committee meeting.
Yeah, so
I'm saying right now. That's why it's up. I can't put it down.
Oh, okay. Let me bring
fine.
it down, Richard. Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Norma is next. Norma, please unmute yourself. Yeah, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I think it's a real crappy system that you have a definite definite mute for everybody all the time unless you unmute them. That's not the way it should work. We should be able to unmute ourselves, and if there's noise, coming from any one person, you can see it on the screen because it gets circled with yellow, right, or squared with yellow, so you can tell them or mute them. My comment is I haven't asked to participate because I couldn't understand the speaker. Apparently everybody else did, which really surprises me. I have excellent equipment where I can understand everybody anymore. It's really different from my usual difficulty hearing, but I couldn't understand past his accent and manner of delivery, where at times, like someone else we know speaks to their shirt down here. So I don't have anything else to say. I'm sorry that I am not a deep academic, a deep economics academic, where I could kind of infer what's being said, even though I couldn't get the words clearly in my hearing.
I have somebody else waiting here on telephone, so I'll go there. It's not Richard this time, it's somebody else. I'm unmuting that person with the telephone number 9307.
Yes, it's David. Thank you. I enjoyed the discussion today. Gene had an interesting comment. It was a quote or a reference to a thought or a notion, one crisis leading to another, and then he had the word thorough going in it. I'm wondering if Gene is still on the call, if you could remind us of that thought and maybe the attribution, if there is one. Thank you.
So I'll let Gene respond first before I go to the next person who's raised the hand. That is Richard Wright.
Okay, Marx says that in, not in Capital, but I think in another of his works, he talks about how a crisis takes place. And I'll take a look, because I just happen to have my theory of capitalist development here. And
Crazy. Yeah.
I'll look for that. I think I may find it in here. So why don't you proceed while I look?
Thank you. Appreciate it. And then also details on the Veterans for Peace conference, if that's open to the public when you have details. Thank you.
Well, I can answer that real quick. One does have to register for that, and I'm not sure what the registry. Go to Vets for Peace, veteransforpeace.org, and look.
Very good. I'll look for that.
Their web page. And
thanks for both items.
Let me explain. But we will have a copy of that for our own use.
Richard Wright, jump in, please.
Yeah, I gotta say, I think I second Norma's objection about this unmute thing. It's really kind of annoying. I was just kind of hoping that Gary Hicks posed problems, and I was hoping that he might say something a little bit more about what he was talking about. I don't know what he's talking about. I understand the Tonkin Gulf resolution, but I was hoping that maybe he would say something. Thank you.
I've asked Gary to unmute and say something. Gary,
yeah, hello?
Yeah.
Hey, Richard, so what is it you wanted to know? Richard Wright, what is it you wanted to know?
He wanted to know what you meant.
No,
With
I
regard to-
want Richard Wright's explanation.
Yeah,
then.
I'm telling you what. Well, Richard Wright is not unmuting himself. He wanted to know, according to your post on the chat, what did you mean? Why don't you talk about it on the electronics?
Yeah,
Okay, well, look, okay, well, let me talk about it. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm referring to a article that was written by Stalin in 1952 called "Economic Problems of Socialism in the USSR."
Mm-hmm.
And there's a specific chapter, chapter 6, which talks about, which describes the roller coaster rides and antagonisms between capitalist powers in the first decade after World War II. And specifically talking about the fate of Germany, Italy, and Japan in relationship to Britain, France, and the so-called Allies. And he's basically cautioning folks that these antagonisms were not solved by World War II. They're going to come back again.
I see. Yeah.
And then he also talks toward the end of that chapter about the difference between the resistance to world war during World War I and the nature of the peace movement since World War II. And that in both cases, what has to happen is you have to be taking a very close look at the nature of imperialism as the highest stage of capitalism.
Okay, Anne Louise, who has not spoken, is next. Please, Anne, go ahead.
Sure. So I'm interested in this interplay with COVID-19. It seems to me we have the crisis that's resolving things, according to our speaker, and we're jumping to the next crisis without ever really figuring out what does this crisis mean, particularly for working people. Is it an opportunity? Particularly my one comment might be that one of the basic problems we've got in terms of the movement in this country is we have a white peace movement, mainly white peace movement, and a mainly African American and Latino social justice movement in our country. So I'm wondering what, particularly with the impact of COVID-19 on those communities particularly, what do we do with this current crisis as socialists?
So this is addressed to Basudev, I assume.
Yes.
Right. Okay, Basudev, will you care to comment on that?
Particularly, I cannot comment more on what should be the line of action in your case, but definitely first of all, what I can generalize the thing in this way, that fascism can take its power not only with its subjective parameter. It needs a serious financial crisis. If we recall Dimitrov thesis, so you need a very deep financial crisis, then only fascism can take its power. Definitely, if it does not have that level of subjective force, then it will not win. But one important point is the financial crisis situation. Secondly, for a fascist power to rise, an important parameter is how much the communist revolutionary forces are dismantled. So these are the parameters when fascists come in power. And now we have a financial situation, a financial crisis situation, when fascists can come to power. That is what we are predicting. And when fascists come in power, they come through a social revolution. That is also a social kind of revolution. That is also have a mass reach of that power. For example, liberals do not need to go with the masses, but fascists, they always come to power with the help of the masses. So that is a mass counter revolution. That is not only a counter revolution, but that is a mass counter revolution. And one significant parameter for that is social Darwinism, extreme social Darwinism. And what we are seeing today, especially in US, this say racism, and the oldest dark things, those actually capitalism in its early stages removed this kind of backwardnesses, but now those are coming back, and those are coming back because of this fascistic rise. And the financial crisis situation is creating the base for it. So I think the fight against racism, the fight for peace, is inherently connected to fight against this present neoliberal capitalist system. So we have to connect all these things together. Only then we can develop a complete fight. I think otherwise, we cannot be successful in our struggle. That is my general comment.
Okay, I think with that, we are up. Our time is up, and thank you very much, Basudev.
Can Jane jump in just a minute? Just note that phrase I had came from the Communist Manifesto, the first part, that the bourgeoisie gets out of one crisis only by paving the way. There's a paragraph in there where he deals very nicely with the crises. That's in the Communist Manifesto, part 1.
Thank you, Gene. And so that's.
I would like to say one thing. Friday was my birthday, my 85th birthday.
Happy birthday, belatedly.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday is a good thing. Hello.
May you live another 20 years, at least.
Or at least
I'm working on it.
You're doing well.
At least what?
I want you to live 20 more years.
Next birthday.
Okay, Gene.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mehmet, I think we thank you, Basudev, and thank you everybody who has helped put together the program and the participants who have participated. And we'll see you again in a week from today on Sunday.
Thanks. This was a great session. Wonderful.
And Basudev, if you're interested in future session, I can send you the link on those.
One more thing. One more thing. Opposite the name, everyone, and all of those, you can save the chat if you'd like to do that. And I have sent a cartoon that is just delightful. It's about defining defund relative to the call to defund the police. And it's very informative and clever cartoon.
Okay.
I think you just sent it to me, though, Norma.
Institute for the Critical Study of Society at the Nebel Proctor Marxist Library receives no corporate funding, nor do we have any paid staff. We rely on the support of working class folks that share our commitment to the socialist legacy of Karl Marx. We continue to need funds to meet necessary expenses. Since we can no longer pass the hat, at our in-person forums, please send contributions to our treasurer, either online via PayPal or by check. The PayPal ID is ICSS Sunday, SUNDAY, at yahoo.com. And the name is Richard Fallenbaum. And checks may be made out to Richard Fallenbaum and sent to him at 1225 Nielsen Street, Berkeley, California, 94706. Fallenbaum is spelled Fallenbaum. To donate directly to the Marxist Library, send a check to the Nebel Proctor Marxist Library at 6501 Telegraph Avenue, Oakland, California, 94609, or directly or donate online at www.paypal.me/npml. For information, write to npml at marxistlibr.org, and the website is marxistlibr.org.